Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Glad you got some refreshments and that you're now here to learn from these three people who have some stories to share with us. And so it's great to see such a nice turnout in the number of people. So our format is going to be, I'm going to ask some questions of Jim and Susan and Elliot, and they'll give some answers. But there will certainly also be a time for you to raise your hand and have the microphone to ask a question, and also have a chance to add your comments or thoughts. Anything else the three of you would like to say before we start? No?
Susan and myself, that this is our experience as opposed to Ava's experience, and Ava might come back and say, no, that wasn't how it happened, or I didn't feel that way, and you're misinterpreting. So just know that with that caveat, that's where we're at. So at least
Okay.
Susan and myself.
Great. Okay, so the first question I'd like to ask is, what advice would you give to colleagues about how to support family members on their journeys of self-discovery?
I could start. My mic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they need to be kept live the whole time. So
Okay, so you just have to keep
so
talking.
we can interrupt each other.
I guess for me, I think from my learning, my main piece of advice would be to lead with support and celebration. And we all have lots of questions. I guess if I had one learning, if I were to go back and be able to do it over again, I think I would have led more with support and questions later instead of, I think I did a bit of the opposite. I had, when she first came out, I had so many questions. And so but the questions for her, having really worked up her courage to come out to us, I think the questions felt like negativity or, questioning her and whether there's real things. So I regret that. And I guess so, yeah, for advice, I would say, yeah, just unconditional support. And I guess the other thing I would say on that, I've learned there's this real spectrum from fear and hate, which I hope no one in this room has, but there's kind of a spectrum from, intolerance to tolerance, but kind of begrudging tolerance, that's weird. And I mean, we all have some implicit biases that this is unfamiliar, it's new, but then trying to get ourselves from just the tolerance to really affirming acceptance and then celebration. I mean, for our daughter, the amount of courage watching her transition, go out into the world, just knowing how everyone was looking at her, just everything that's going on in the news. I mean, the courage is just incredible. So just really celebrating that. Can I add one more? Maybe I'm talking too long, but
No,
I think it's on this point of celebrating it. I also think coming at it from positivity. I mean, it certainly is true, and you see it in the news. There's, bullying, there's violent attacks, there's mental health issues. There's all of that exists, and so not to say it doesn't exist, but there's also so much positivity. I mean, just watching Ava. I mean, she's thriving in a way, like if you all were to see, I mean, she grew up in this congregation, right? And so many of you have memories of her like sitting in the back on her phone, and I think, just the way she's just engaging, and so you're just so apparent that she's just so much happier and comfortable with herself and wants to talk to people. And so there's just so much positivity, not to focus on we often focus on the negatives, I feel like.
And I would offer a quick analogy here that Ava told us when we were asking all our questions. She said, how do you, my questions, well, how do you know and how are you sure and so forth. And she said, imagine that you lived your entire life in a dark cave. And then one day something happens and some rocks move or something, and then some sunlight comes down in. And you're like, oh, and then you suddenly have hope that you didn't have. But until that day, you just felt depressed and anxious and like something is wrong and you didn't know what was wrong. And fortunately, because we live in a modern world and there's all this online communication, she was able to connect with other people who'd gone through the same experience. So that was really helpful for her. That helped her understand why she was feeling the way she was feeling. And so
I think for me, in terms of colleagues and collegiality, I was incredibly fortunate. You know, the friends that I had at school were always very accepting of me. And I went to an all-girls school, 600 girls and me. It was hell. it was pure hell in so many ways I can't even begin to tell you. But the close friends that I had there, who I confided in at a very early age, were always very accepting of me. And even when I came out here to the States and started my singing career, of course, obviously, as a singer, there was nothing at that point that I could do hormonally, etc., with my voice being my source of income and the thing that I loved the most to do. But I didn't really hide how I felt from other people. And most people have been very accepting. And then when I did decide to go through with the actual gender transition and start the hormonal treatment, I remember I came to see Andy and I was terrified. I was really scared because I was like, oh man, you know, I'm going to screw myself out of this nice job that I love and these wonderful people and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And the great and lovely Dr. Chislett turned around and said, well, we don't really care what you sing, we just want you to be here. So that to me was a real gift and a real boon, as this congregation has been, because you've gone with me through this whole thing, and I've had nothing but support from people here. And I think it is a case of accepting people as they present themselves to us, and not looking at them with any sense of looking at them askance or any unfounded fear. Why would you be fearful if you have not yet had anything to be fearful of? You know, I mean, if somebody came at you with a knife and said, guess what, I'm transgender and I'm going to kill you, then yeah, you'd be fearful, right? I mean, it's got nothing to do with being transgender, though. But, you know, some people look at transgender people in that light, that there's something intrinsically wrong somewhere, and there really isn't. I think we're just trying to make something intrinsically right within ourselves. And I mean, it's always been a joke at the San Francisco Opera that I'm the only guy who's ever been allowed to be in the women's dressing room at the San Francisco Opera. You know, so you're in there with 20 women, like all in various states of undress and whatever. I mean, if that's not acceptance, I don't know what is. You know, so I think really it is we're lucky here. My mother was always very quick to point out to me that we live in a bubble. We're very lucky. We live in the Bay Area. There's a lot of things go here that are not readily accepted as easily in other parts of the country or the world. But I think, you know, I think we are very fortunate, and I think we're fortunate that many people are prepared to at least accept people as they present themselves, and then ask questions and find out more, and come to a level of comfort, I think, for both people, for the person who is transgender and the people who are working with them or surrounding them.
Thank you all. This is really, it's a real gift that you're giving us today to share all your insights with us. What would you say has been the most surprising thing about the experience you've gone through or are going through?
You want me to, you look like you're thinking, Elliot. Do you want me to start?
I tried thinking once. It was the worst 3 minutes of my life. Yeah, carry on. Let me
Okay.
have another really bad 3 minutes.
Well, I guess the most surprising, I guess what I would say is the whole thing has been thoroughly surprising. So So Ava came home for the holidays in December of 2020. And she, you know, said she wanted to talk about something, and, you know, but it was, she kind of was trying to ease into it. I think she had been trying to process it, easing it into the whole idea herself. And then she was trying to ease us into it. So she started with, I'm questioning my gender, but it quickly, within like a few days. So it came very fast and hard for us as parents. I've since learned that when youth come out at that age, it's like they've lost so much time that, you know, it's just, they want to do it tomorrow or actually yesterday, you know. It's so for us, the whole thing was very surprising. We did not have any inkling, you know, in our 19 years of living with her. I mean, there was things we could look back on, but we didn't have any thought, had literally never crossed our minds. So it was a lot to get used to in a really short period of time. And I feel like, you know, right after she told us, and she wanted to, you know, start on medical treatments like right away. And it was like, wow, we're just still trying to get used to this whole idea of it. So it was both surprising and very sudden for us. I will say since then, I've done a lot of learning. This is how I deal with difficulty. So I would, you know, books and websites, and we joined a bunch of groups, which, shout out to the groups, are amazing, of other parents going through the same thing. There's PFLAG, there's a Trans Families of Silicon Valley group that's amazing. So learned a lot, tried to learn very quickly, and learn the reason that it feels so kind of unknown. And, you know, I think people are saying, like, is it new? It's like, no, it's not new. It's literally been around as long as humans, right? It's been for thousands of years. And so as I read, it's like, oh, and different cultures accept it, like the Hijra in India or Katwe in Thailand, and Jewish rabbinical literature apparently recognizes like 6 genders. And there's all these Two-Spirit, Native American, there's all these examples, and all across the world, across all cultures. So it's just kind of this, you know, paradox of like, yet we feel like it's completely unknown and new because it's been hidden from us, the same way that Ava kind of hid it from us. Our culture is kind of hiding it from us. So I guess the whole thing has been surprising, but the more I've learned, the more I realize it's been around. And I guess one sort of personal anecdote for me is I also was then reflecting back. I grew up in Baltimore in the, you know, the 60s, 70s, 80s. And what I learned was that actually I had forgotten, but that there were a few transgender women in my neighborhood that I had forgotten about. And as I looked back at the history and realized that Johns Hopkins was one of the early, I think it started because they had a practice around intersex people, and they made some actually really tragic things, like, oh, we can just randomly assign them a gender. That, what could go wrong, you know? and suicides, and a lot of things went wrong. So, and then they had the first in the 60s and 70s gender affirming clinic. And so I think that now, as I look back, that's probably why I was kind of in a locus of some of those women. So, so yeah, it's surprising, but it in some ways it shouldn't be.
I think what you said earlier about a spectrum, everything is on a spectrum. You know, gender is on a spectrum, sexuality is on a spectrum, and we tend to forget. We tend to think that there are these 2 poles, and that nothing falls in between there. But that's not the case. In terms of things that are surprising for me, in terms of my actual treatment, I was surprised at the fact that I have no voice left. That was, I knew it was a gamble, and that was a big shock. And I'm still trying to come to terms with that. But in terms of other things, it's amazing to me how much support there is community-wise and online, etc. nowadays, because when I was going through this, I was experiencing it on my own, thought there was nobody else in the world who felt this way, and there was nothing at all.
It's really dramatically.
Yeah, it's unbelievably different now. And another thing that surprised me was coming from a very conservative, I would say, racist family who really didn't like anything that was different at all. Because I didn't actually I never told my dad or my grandmother. I didn't tell my mother until I was about 20, 25 or something like that. I was surprised at how readily she actually came around to it. That was a big surprise because I was expecting an enormous fight, and I was very good at fighting. So I was expecting a really big one, and that actually it didn't happen. So that I was very fortunate in that regard. But yeah, I think really the biggest surprise is everything that is available to young people today who are going through this.
And to their parents.
And to their parents, absolutely. Because I mean, again, my mom had nowhere to turn. She didn't have a clue. I think she'd sort of made herself comfortable with the thought that everybody in the whole world thought I was a lesbian, which I've never been. There's nothing wrong with lesbians; they're very nice people. But I've never been one. But that's what everybody thought I was because that was the only understanding they had. You were either straight or you were gay. And then I threw this one at her. And she was like, oh. And we were actually in the middle of a pizza parlor in my hometown, and I was very depressed and down about a number of things. And she's saying, what's the matter? And nothing's the matter with me. And she says, well, something must be wrong. And I'm, no, nothing's wrong with me. And she said, and I finally said, well, what if it's something you don't want to hear? And she said, well, I wouldn't be a very good mother if I didn't want to know what was bothering my children. Oh, man. So I look around, I'm thinking, okay, we're in the middle of this busy pizza parlor at lunchtime, right? She can't really make too much of a fuss here. So I started telling her about my girlfriend and I had split up and blah, 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 blah. And then I said, but I'm not gay. And she sort of went, oh, what are you then? I said, well, I'm transgender. And she said, so what's that? So I started explaining that. And she said, well, do you know anybody else like you? And I said, no. And this is really old statistics, right? But I said, no, Mom, they think about 1 in 100,000 people feel like this. And I don't know 100,000 people. So I don't know anybody else like me. And without even so much as blinking, she said, well, I always said you were 1 in a million, but I guess 1 in 100,000 will have to do. Thanks, Mom.
Can I just, because that's incredible, Elliot, how alone
Yeah.
you were in your experience, and just contrasting that with Ava. So she came out online, she started to make friendships online and to realize, and then at her college, Northeastern, and then friends of friends in Boston, she now has this huge, like, not huge, but I mean like a whole community of transgender people who really have each other's backs, really supporting each other. So I just can visualize how much harder, or at least more lonely
there was
it
nothing.
was.
What was online? There was no online.
Right.
There was nothing. We didn't even have a computer in my high school. There was absolutely nothing. So yeah.
Big change. Even in the last, I know talking to parents, I think certainly since, but even in the last 5 years, I think, talking to parents from, like we were in this trans family group and we're all sharing. And I remember one of the moms saying like, oh, I know that feeling. There's just no information, no people to talk to. I'm like, no, I'm having a lot of feelings, but those aren't it. There are so many people willing to pick up the phone, some of the like leaders in the field just willing to spend time with me on the phone, so many books, so many resources. So I just, even in the last like literally 5 years, I think that's changed a lot.
I think my mum did start to have a bit of a problem actually after I had told her, when she had time to sort of, think a little bit. Because I think there must be, for parents, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there must be a sort of a grieving at losing the child that you assumed that you had. You have this little baby and it's assigned whatever it's assigned at birth, and you have all these dreams and thoughts, and they're going to grow up and you want them to wear this and that, and blah, 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 and you're looking forward to their first date or their wedding or whatever it might be. And then suddenly there's this other, not really another person, it's the same person, but there's this different identity, and you've lost that,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, that's a really interesting thing to bring up. And I would say Jim and I have had really different experiences with that. So for me, like to have what I thought was a just like closed off teenage son, to go from that to like, I have this talkative, engaging, love, like daughter who just wants to share it. I'm like, sometimes overshare, like, but it's like, like we just have this, like, we'll just go out. And so I gained a daughter. I really, for me, just personally, I gained a daughter, but I don't think Jim
Yeah.
might have been harder for you.
I would say that it was. I mean, for me, the fortunate thing was that we hadn't painted her room blue when she was a baby, and I hadn't like laid out all this, like, I expect you to be the quarterback of the 49ers by the time you grow up. And I didn't have that expectation. And I also didn't have a family business that had to be handed down to the eldest son, so I didn't have that. But I still felt like, am I going to have someone to go hiking with? Am I going to have someone to, who likes to camping? Well, it turns out, even though we took her camping all these years, she really didn't like it because it was all dirty and she didn't like to get
And then your older daughter, Anita, loves
but my
camping.
older daughter likes to go camping. So
Actually, Jim, on that note, I was going to share, I mean, one of the most really kind of wrenching but touching moments during all these discussions in December of 2020 is, and we were trying to figure out, like, is this a fad? I mean, we didn't know. But I remember just the depth of feeling that she, and crying. And then at one point, she turned to Jim and she said, I'm going to cry just saying it. She said, I tried so hard to be the son you wanted me to be.
yeah, and I said, you did a great job. And she did the whole Eagle Scout project, and it became an Eagle Scout. Her Eagle Scout project is the lights in the parking lot out in the back.
Yeah.
So when you come for your night meetings, just know about that. So
Okay. So is there anything that, when you think back on your experience, and if you have other comments you want to make about your own experience, your family's experience, I'm wondering if you can think of anything that in hindsight you wish you would have done differently.
Well, I mentioned one that I definitely go back to, which is all the questions. And Ava and I have taken a number of different ways to work through that, because I had the feeling like, wow, how lucky for you. I'm part of this church. At my work, I had gone to, like, if there was a transgender ally training, I was one of the 5 people who had showed up. I was like, I kind of had this self-image, like, how lucky for you that, and so it hurt me, honestly, that wasn't her experience, that she felt the questions that I, in the moment, because it, again, came hard and fast, and felt those questions that way. And I feel like we've now worked it through. We've had a lot of conversations about it. We also, all the medical stuff for me is a thing, as a parent, you're sort of protective of your child. And so she ended up going to UCSF. Partly, so one thing to know about, so for an 18 and above, there's something called informed consent, which is a great thing, which, is basically if you're an adult and you say this is who you are, then, you have the right to gender affirming medical treatment. And so she could have done things a lot more easily than she did, I guess. I mean, it's partly a shout out to informed consent, and also, also a shout out to California. Things are easier than they are in other states, but she could have done it easier, and she kind of slowed down to bring us along, which I appreciate, but yeah, I wish I had gotten there faster.
I don't think I would necessarily have done anything different, because I did everything I possibly could to be myself and keep my own integrity and broach a subject that, as far as I was concerned, if people saw me as gay, but they liked me and thought I was an okay person, then that was going to help somebody else, because the next person they met who probably was gay, then they were going to be more accepting. You know what I mean? So I always saw it as sort of a teaching tool in a way. I don't know. The singing thing has been really hard. Now there's actually a couple of transgender singers in the opera world, one of whom identifies as male and has changed their name and all the pronouns in the bio and everything, has only had top surgery and hasn't had any hormonal treatment, and still sings. So, I mean, I've always been between the devil and the deep blue. So I've always just been in the wrong era, you know. So, you know, maybe that would have been a better way for me to go to still. But then, if I had done that, I would probably still be, you know, I'd probably be even more poor than I actually already am now, because now I have a real job. You know, and I don't think if I was singing, I would ever have allowed myself to be anything other than a singer. I almost had to lose my voice to give myself permission to be something else, to actually take on a career of a different nature. So I don't know. I don't think I would have done anything different. I don't think.
Yeah, I think I would probably just agree with Susan on this, that probably just being more supportive right away. But, you know, when you're surprised by something, it's hard to know what the correct reaction should be. So you know, yes, it would be great if we had celebrated right away, but I don't know that we would have necessarily known that that was the correct reaction without going down the wrong path.
So for any of you out there who might have that chance, yeah.
So that brings me to the question I think we're going to kind of end on, but then I want to open up the questions to everybody here. And that is, tell us something that we can do. What can each of us do that would be supportive to people, to families, to individuals who are going through the trans experience and are on a journey? And, you know, what can we do to be better supporters, better advocates?
Were you thinking, Elliot? I can go.
Yeah, can you feel the heat? Yeah. That's hard.
I could start if you
Go
want.
ahead, please.
I guess I would just start with the simple things. I mean, you're always hearing about names and pronouns, but you know, it is just a very basic sign of human dignity and respect to just use people's appropriate names and pronouns. And I think, and I will say, I went to one thing with the fear mongering people, and they will aggressively use the wrong. They were like, "Oh, is this your son?" Like, no, it's not. Like, so like, just use the right pronouns is so simple. And one little public service message about they, them, theirs, because I have found that people of my generation and above get really flummoxed by they, them for some reason.
I do.
And you may. Okay. So they, them. So this became, I've done a whole grammar deep dive as part of my deep dive. And so in the Victorian era, there was more about, we're going to use he and she where you know the gender, but it used to be that they, them was used more frequently. And even now, it is very correct, and you all do it all the time, that if you don't know someone's gender, you use their pronoun, and I just did it, their pronoun, and it's singular, and it's fine. So again, I just, you know, because it's been really surprising to me as I've talked to like old friends, and they're like, oh, but they, them. It's like, you know, just calm down. Like, it's fine. It's actually grammatically fine, and it's, and I don't mean to.
No, but
but to me, it's something internalized in us.
read some old English literature.
Yeah, exactly,
You know,
exactly.
read some, you know,
Exactly.
Bronte or before, or, you know, because it's a little bit like the royal we.
Yeah, yeah.
Where, you know, it's a generic situation that sort of fits everybody. But having said that, I don't think it's easy at all. I think it's absolutely unbelievably difficult.
Okay.
I sang for a while with a transgender chorus that a friend of mine started in San Francisco. I could not keep up with this at all. And the, they, them, she, all this, I'd be like, what? And I just couldn't do it. And we're so conditioned, we all are conditioned. We see somebody and we give them a gender. We say they're male or female. And even if they're in transition, it's really, sometimes it's hard to tell which way they're going. So it's like, I don't have a clue what to call these people. And I will say this, young people today who are going through this are so unbelievably oversensitive. Incredibly oversensitive, I think. Because they cannot deal with somebody misgendering them, even if it's an accident. They get really offended.
So I might,
Go ahead.
I may have a slightly different view on that, just from my life experience with Ava, is that what we found is that in the early part of the transition, when she was feeling shaky, she wasn't feeling confident, she was feeling all the judgment, it was early in her transition where it wasn't clear. And so watching her walk into so during that whole period, she was very sensitive about it. And I would just watch the wrong pronoun and her whole face would just a cloud.
Yeah.
However, as she has gotten confident out in the world, in herself, in how the world treats her, she's not sensitive about her pronouns. And if you misgender her, you still shouldn't do it.
Right.
But if you misgender her now, she lets it roll.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And I definitely think it is a comfort thing, most definitely. But it's you're going to misgender somebody, it's just going to happen.
Right.
And
And then the
and
thing is,
everyone has to be accepting of that. It's just
and just to then be like, don't make a fuss, right? I mean, just like, everybody
However-
makes mistakes, correct? Move on. Don't make it about, like some fuss, like, oh, but it always is so hard for me. I don't
However, when I had legally changed my gender at City Hall, I went to get my gender changed on my driver's license. And I go in to the DMV, which is always such a pleasurable experience, isn't it? It's just so much fun. And I sat there for about 3 hours, and then finally my number came up and I went to the desk and there's this lady sitting there and I said a little bit nervously, I said, I'm here, I just want to change my gender on my driver's license. And she looks up at me and she's like, okay. I'm sorry, ma'am, what did you say?
That's the aggressive thing I'm talking about.
She was purposely.
Purposely.
Every time I said, and in the end I just said to her, stop calling me ma'am, or I'm going to speak to your supervisor right now. I mean, I really had to get really upset with her because it was obvious that she was purposely she knew what she was doing with my license.
Yeah.
So, some people are just they really want to make you feel that you're doing something very, very wrong.
Yeah, we've experienced that too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting though, to take your experience with the DMV, again, a fast forward, I don't know how many years it is till when we did it, like 2 or 3 years ago, but it is so different now. So I don't know, quick shout out to the Transgender Law Center, largest trans-led organization in the country. Very cool. We're big supporters. It'd be great, a great organization to support, but they have a whole set of resources. They've got a manual, they've got, because to do it throughout all your documents, you have to do it in a certain order. When do you do your birth certificate, social security, your driver's license, like there's a whole efficient way to do it. And the forms, and they have all those. And so they're a great resource. And so we went through all that together. And by the time we got to the courthouse, again, it's just so much better, I think, easier than it used to be. And also being in California, even today, if you live in a lot of states, you have to take out a newspaper ad to declare and have it be out there for some period of time. So you don't have to do that in California. So, in California, it was, I think, we had all this support through the Transgender Law Center. I think, Ava was on it. And I remember going to the courthouse and there was another trans person there and we high-fived. And I was just thinking that I love being in California for this and being now when so much progress has been made.
Right. Yeah, my mom would misgender me all the time. She'd say to somebody, oh, this is my son, and she's living in California, and I'd be just like, and you see these people, their eyes start to and I just say, she's 74. What can you do? And she wouldn't even know she'd done it. I'd be like, Mom, What? You kept saying she. I did? Oh, I'm sorry. And
Yeah, I kept using the wrong name because, you know, you say the same name and you refer to a person, you know, 200,000 times in their lifetime, and pretty soon you get used to it and you can't remember to use the correct new name stuff. So I had to, my password at work, I always, you know, put in the new name so that I had a tool to try to practice using the new name. But it was challenging to switch over. You know, it took a while, and I, you know, probably still make mistakes, but not as many anymore.
my family got mad at me about that because I happened to choose a name that started with the same 2 letters as my birth name. My birth name was Elspeth, and I chose Elliot, and so everyone goes, Elspeth. Yeah, I got some gift for that, I have to say.
If this is a good time, let's open it up to questions from people here. Anyone have a question or comment you'd like to share? I'll bring the mic. Yes.
Hi. First of all,
Ava.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your experience. I know that it can be difficult to sit in front of a group of people and tell things that are very, very close to your heart. So thank you for that. You said in hindsight, you maybe there were things sort of telling you that Ava, you know, wanted to share her truth, and you didn't see it when it happened, but in hindsight, you could see that there were some things. So what advice would you give to parents who do see those signs to encourage their children to speak their truth and reveal those things that are just so close to their hearts?
Yeah, and I'll pick that one up because I think it was me who said that. So for us, Ava worked. I mean, again, she was like so it wasn't quite that there were signs that she wanted to share her truth. It wasn't that at all. She was all in on being the model son. And so when I said that for us, it was more like, oh, why are we spending so much time fighting about polo shirts? I'd be like, it's such a simple shirt. Like, why are you having such a negative reaction? So that's one that I don't know that I could have seen. Like, it was one of those anomalies, like, well, that's weird. But like, I don't know that I could have left from that to say, oh, you must be transgender, right? Because she was hiding it just so well. I do think we're now in a community of families that there are a lot of kids and youth who are more kind of what you're describing of they're trying things out. And that's often a sign. Like I know for Ava, when she finally came to this, not until she was 19, there's the trying out phase, like to see, is this really, you know, this is what I'm feeling, but you know. And so if kids and youth are trying things out and maybe wanting to be called by a different name or gender or want to wear something different, yeah, I do think as parents to not be afraid of that and to support that journey along the way, especially for kids. We've learned that there's definitely kids who come out like, you know, from when they're really little and that, you know, and that's, you know, to just really early on for those parents to be really supportive. And I think there's often a trigger around puberty. And I think that's when Ava started feeling it. We didn't see it, but it's like, because up until then, your bodies are kind of the same, you know, and it's like puberty can be a kind of traumatizing thing for if you're transgender. And so that's when, so I guess to your question, I think for those kids who are putting little signals out, yeah, to honor them and really support their journey.
My family had also say that, you know, looking back, there are signs. I knew when I was very, very tiny. And my grandfather caught me standing at the toilet once when I was about 4 trying to pee like a little boy. That was probably a big mess. You know, and I hated wearing girls' clothes. There's all these pictures of me. My mom would dress my next sister down and myself, you know, exactly the same. And she's there with a big smile and I've got tears coming down my cheeks on all these pictures and stuff. It's, you know, it's like, well, couldn't you really, you know, work it out? But, you know, it's just, It's like I said, you get your little baby and they tell you what it is and
They tell you what they think it is.
what they think it is.
That reminds me of the Doonesbury comic strip this morning. I don't know if you saw that, but they
Yeah.
have a comic about a gender reveal party, and a pregnant mother at the last panel says, "It's a boy," and the fetus inside the womb says, "So you might think."
What other questions are we have? Or
You've got all
does-
this coming, Andy. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Why don't we go with those?
Zoom, if you have questions, you can ask those. Derek?
Again, I echo everyone else affirmation and how wonderful it is to have this panel today. So thank you all for that. I have a quick comment, and then I also have a question. The comment is based on that we had an employee who 6 months in changed the gender pronouns, and so had to go through the exercise of constant mistakes, and they were very, very understanding, and so I was really appreciative of that. But if it's useful, the one practice I ended up doing was realizing that the reason I was having a hard time with using gender pronouns was because of the fact that when I was directly dealing with them, I wasn't usually having to use those pronouns, and so I was definitely just not getting the practice in it. And so I ended up Craig and I ended up writing dialogues for us, almost as if you were learning a language so that we could practice it, because we were just not getting practice in general, because when you refer to someone, you're not using usually gender pronouns at all. And so we were not getting the practice that way. So if it's helpful, that was something that was helpful to me. The question I have is, as a bookstore owner, is there a book or books that you wish everyone would read?
Jim's looking at me because
Yeah,
I have
she
a
read all the
big
books.
bookshelf of
She has a stack
transgender
of
books
like this.
that everyone would read. So it depends a lot on where you're coming from. There is a book, and I'm going to try to not blank on her name, but like for just looking at myself, like kind of age range we've got here. There's the, help me with her name. She's the head of the literature department at Colby College. And she wrote, and I can share it afterwards. She wrote, what do you know it? Yes, Jennifer Finney Boylan. Thank you. So yeah, Jennifer Finney Boylan. I think it's called She's Not There, or anyway, it's a memoir about her transition, and she's a little more of the age range. She was very alone. There weren't a lot of resources, but it's very. I think that's a really good one. It's just very human. She's the head of a literature department. She's a very good writer, and it's just very human and very well written. There's another book that really helped me personally. So this is more like if you have in your family, and again, my brain, I didn't come up with these before, so I may not. Someone could pop up with this one. There's a UCLA pediatrician who went through a transition with her daughter, and it's her memoir about what that was for her. And it was comforting for me because she's a pediatrician and she didn't see the signs and she didn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, I don't feel so bad. But she's very, yeah, it's a really well written, and I've gone to her talks now and stuff, and I will Google her name, but I'm forgetting it at the moment. I'll remind myself of the name. And I think if you do UCLA pediatrician transgender, I think it'll be the first thing that comes up. Yeah.
No, I wish I thought to look at my bookshelf before I came here, but I didn't. I'm sure there are. Read a lot of books, haven't had a lot of time for reading for a few years though, but that's what I was trying to, because with their store,
Should I Google this?
The book I got that I thought was really good in that regard was How to Keep Your Volkswagen Alive for the Complete Idiot. So is there a gender change for dummies book, something like that?
Just so you know, he was actually talking about his Volkswagen before that. That's not a reference to a transgender book.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Don't buy that book for this topic.
I don't know. Is there a transgender for dummies? Maybe we should write one.
I don't know, Derek and Craig, is there anything in your bookstore?
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, don't know.
We have a couple other questions on Zoom. Oh, go ahead, Derek. Do you want to respond? Do you have that book?
Sure, since you asked, we actually have a number of things based on gender pronouns. But I think the thing that has really been wonderful to me has been just like an explosion of fiction, like Cemetery Boys and a few other fictional pieces in which transgender is an important part of the personality of the person, but it's because of the story itself.
That's not
And
everything.
I think the ability to have stories where people see themselves along a spectrum of gender as well as sexuality, I think is just so important. It just feels like in the last couple of years, there's been an explosion
Yeah.
of that.
Right.
Actu-
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, and I think that's an important point for supporting people as well. I mean, because somebody's transgender, that's not the only thing they are.
Right.
They like music and they love cats. And am I talking about myself here? I think I am. But I mean, it's not the be all and end all of their existence. And whereas I think a lot of people are happy to share information and to be sort of educational. Sometimes it's good to just say, "Oh, are you? Oh, that's cool. Have you seen such and such a movie?"
Yeah,
Or blah blah
100%.
blah blah blah, and sort of not make it the only thing that they
Totally.
are.
Totally. And actually that reminds me of probably, if I were to say actually my number one top book recommendation, and maybe this is what you were thinking of. So Jenny Finney Boylan, in addition to her memoir, she wrote a work of fiction called Mad Honey. So I would say Mad Honey. Mad, like there's actually MAD, honey.
Honey, like Winnie the Pooh.
Yes,
Honey? Oh.
Mad Honey. And it's it's a fiction. It's like you say, it's got lots of other things going on, but it's written by Jenny Finney Boylan and it has a transgender main character. I won't tell you who it is yet until you start into it because you don't know in the beginning. And it's just a great fun read, and it also has a lot of these themes in it. So that would be my number one recommendation. And I did find the book that I was thinking of, and this would be again with people who, especially who might have issues in their family, not issues, transgender. Wonderful people in their family. Her name's Pariah Hassouri, P-A-R-I-A-H-A-S-S-O-U-R-I, and the book is called Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change. So that's a really good book.
We have a couple other questions on Zoom. Thank you all. Cindy Chinley.
Yeah, we had a question for Elliot. What year did you come out? Because people keep talking about, oh, back then and then now. So that was one. And then I had a question comment too after that.
Trying to find out how old I am, Cindy. I can tell you how old I am. I'll be 61 next week. But sorry. Oh, thank you. Well, like my mom says, stay chubby and they won't see the wrinkles. It's my one reason for not losing weight. I was when I told my mom. Is that what you mean, Cindy?
Yeah.
about 25. So that was back in 1988.
Mhm.
Yeah, in a another
Is there
sanctuary.
anything that you attribute to the fact, maybe in California, that things have opened up so much? And also, I know Ava was in Boston, which I think is a very liberal, progressive type of place.
Yeah, I would say, I think, but a lot of her, she did do stuff here and in Boston, both are progressive. But I do think, again, we were on these parent groups, which were very helpful, as I said. We were doing them weekly for a while we were still in the fog of trying to figure everything out. And yeah, it just was very apparent to me, like the story I told, like even someone who had been through it like 5 or 7 years ago, like their experience was so different than ours was. And that kind of blew my mind. Like, that's a really short period of time to have things change so much. So that's, yeah, things. And so then if you go like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I think that was even, more different.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it is that's changed really. I think just people are just standing up for their own rights more than, or feeling the ability to do so. I don't know. I'm not a very political person, so I don't kind of look at things in that way. But it does seem like we're crawling out of the woodwork sometimes now. It's like there was nobody before, now we're everywhere. And I don't know why that
So
is. I mean, hopefully it's just society progressing in a positive way, but
Yeah. I mean, I could put 2 things out here, and this is where I'm, perhaps Ava might put me into like, Mom, you're not the expert. And so I'm just putting these out from my observations as the parent. I think 2 things I've noticed. I do think online has made a huge difference. I mean, that Ava could find all this information, put a name to what she was experiencing, connect with people, create a community. Like, I think a lot of that was because online. So when you hear people say, it's contagious because it's online. Well, it's not contagious because it's online, but it is true that there's a lot of information online that people can find out what they're experiencing and connect with people. So I think that's a big thing. The other thing is, I guess I would say, just in the medical community. So there's, clinical trials going on. A lot of these doctors are now under attack, which is kind of scary. Like the doctor at UCSF, who we've seen, is like, he's had, all this hate stuff, and he's, but there is an established body of medicine over the last 15 years that wasn't there, so I think it's more accepted as well in that community.
What do you think, Jim? You think anything specific? I mean, have you noticed from obviously, not having this experience with Eva until fairly recently, can you look back and see if there was it just something you just weren't aware of, or
I can tell you a story about something that we weren't aware of. We had a neighbor who lived
yeah.
right across the street from us, and she was kind of an unusual woman. She was in her 70s when I think I got to know her, and she had a literal machine shop in the back of her house, like lathes and drill presses and stuff like that. And this is a small house too, so a good chunk of the house was taken up with that. And she helped me with some projects that I was working on, and I was kind of amazed because she could pick up these big, heavy tools and move them from one part of the room to the next. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good for a woman in her 70s. She's pretty strong. And then she passed. We enjoyed going to parties with her and stuff. And
I would consider her a friend for
she's a friend of ours.
what,
yeah.
15 years or so?
Yeah. And then she passed away, and her family came in and started living in the house and so forth. And we told her sister about Ava's experience and Ava's story. And she said, "Oh, did you know Marilyn was transgender?" Like, no, we had no idea. We just totally accepted her for who she was. So I'm glad we did.
Right. Yeah, it's that stealth thing for much older persons.
Yeah.
And my big question to people is always, when they're upset, is like, why do you care? Why do you care? I mean, even when I was a kid, I'd walk around the block to my grandmother's, and there were some of the local yobbish kids who would sit on the wall, "Oh, are you a girl or a boy?" And I literally would turn around and say, what do you want me to be? Why do you care? You know, and it's still my question. Why do people care? What is it to you? You know, why is it a problem for you if I identify this way? I've never really understood that.
Mhm.
Um,
Can I make one comment too?
Sure.
So because of this church and writing Operation Marriage and being an ally at my former workplace, Oracle, I got to know some transgender employees, coworkers, and one of them went into, you know, at my invitation, she gave a 1-hour Zoom about the scientific basis or the projected scientific basis for how people have their gender identity or their sexuality. And I think that we don't know why a person is right-handed or left-handed, or even why someone may be transgender, but there are some, you know, scientific research on different structures of the brain and how, as a child in the womb or a baby in the womb, how you are being bathed in the hormones that you get from your mother at different times of your development. And that has a great effect on your sexuality and your gender identity.
Yeah.
Any
Oh,
comments on that?
I have a little anecdote just because I'm one of the younger people here, so I can maybe share some of my own experience of
Yeah.
like myself and my own community. So I feel like I have an unusually high number of friends that are trans or like trans community gender experimenting thing. I feel like in the younger generations, it is becoming more accepted to kind of question your gender and explore. So it's a little less, you have to like pick one or the other, and you have to like, oh, I'm gonna stay the one I was at birth until I fully commit to just swap to the other one. So like, you may have noticed on Zoom, I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. I'm not picky about it, I'm really okay with either, but like that feels more right to me to kind of be like vaguely non-binary kind of, you know, but I'm good with both. In high school, I have my best friend from high school came out as a trans guy. Another really good friend of mine came out as a trans woman. I have a lot of friends from high school that like switch completely or are non-binary now. So like, I just know a ton of people. And like, it's funny because I think when you're younger, sometimes you subconsciously group with people that before that anybody knows, you're like leaning toward that. And then everyone comes out and you're like, whoa, how did we all become friends with each other before any of us were aware of what was going on? But I think there's like subconscious stuff that happens. But yeah, I'm in a lot of online spaces and just a lot of people kind of discussing that and like feeling free to experiment, where it's okay to be like, oh, I'm gonna try using they, them pronouns, or I'm gonna try he, him pronouns, and like, oh, didn't like that one, gonna go back to a different one, you know? So I think people are just trying to be more open and just like play with it to feel what fits right for them. So I think it's just more of a thing the younger generation know.
well,
Thank you.
I'm more discovering that spectrum as well, because when I was a kid, I was okay as I was, and I thought other people should be okay with me as I was, you know. And in some ways, going through gender reassignment is really just kowtowing to a binary system again, because you're going from one to the other. You know, what happens to everybody in between? And it shouldn't be, people shouldn't feel that they have to go through gender reassignment to be comfortable where they are. You know, I think that's a valid point as well. So you know, it's like I was fine when I was a kid. Why did I suddenly, as I got older, decide I had to do something drastic? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
and like
just-
I know a lot of lovely people like dance and stuff that they didn't just pick one binary one and they're just doing that. They're like, oh, I can like present kind of in between, and this is just what feels good to me. And so there's like, yeah, they pick a pronoun that feels good, but it doesn't mean like, oh, I use she, her, therefore I'm super femme, super woman. They're like, I can play with that, and this is just what feels good, and like people can accept that. So it's really nice to be able to exist in that middle.
Yeah, by the time we get to
That's very
Star
cool.
Trek, we'll all be fine, won't we? You know, when we're living on those ships up there and stuff. Yeah. So
We have some more questions here.
Yes, Janet.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay, when you're ready, we have some on Zoom.
There was some questions and Jim and Susan, I laughed about your bookshelf that's like this. I don't have a title, but I think I appreciate you mentioning the Native American culture, transcultural reverence. There is a book, not the title, but it talks about gender fluidity in the Pueblo cultures. I think it's called Two-Spirit, something in the title of the book. But for those who are interested in reading how pan-cultural this natural thing is, that's a society and a group of people who are reverent about towards and the people in the middle.
Right.
That's the Two-Spirit term.
Totally.
I don't have a title, but you find things up right away when you get on the
Yeah.
book. So
Elliot, I guess I've always known you as, you know, the way you are now. I've always thought of you this way. But two questions. One, I know you're frustrated about your voice. Have you talked with doctors about that, or anybody, voice teachers that can, you know, is there some way to maybe solve that problem?
Not really. I've been studying with somebody since I've gone through transition. I've actually pretty much now stopped because I've come to the conclusion that it's not going to change in any formative way for me, in any kind of useful way, and I just can't keep affording lessons. So
Okay.
it's I mean, you know, it's like any boy's voice breaks, and you
Yeah.
don't know what. I've seen many fine boy sopranos in England turn out to be just regular milksop tenors, or, you know, run of the mill. Yeah, you know, just nothing special anymore. And that's what happened. So it was a gamble. I knew it was a gamble, but I was also getting to an age where I was not going to be hired to do the opera roles I was comfortable doing anymore, and that sort of thing. So, so no, I don't think there is a way for it to really change. Yeah.
The second question is, other than the voice issues, and by the way, when it comes to your voice, we think your voice is fantastic.
Yeah.
There are no regrets there whatsoever. You are a blessing to all of us.
Well, if you find the other 2.5 octaves that I lost lying around somewhere, please send them back, because I do miss them.
Well, I'm probably the wrong person. I'm challenged in that way anyway. So it's, yeah, I know how you feel. I always joke that the tenors always get the good parts.
They always get the girl.
Pardon?
They always get the girl.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And I'm a bass, so been there, done that, know how you feel. The other question is the vocal issues aside, have there been any regrets, you know, that you have made the change, and have you had any regrets other than that in making that change?
No, I think only really the voice situation. I mean, like I said, I'm very fortunate. I have a career that I really love, and so I think if I had to go through this and was bagging groceries at Safeway or something, I probably would feel a little bit more upset about it, or resentful, or you know. But I have a use still, so so that's, you know, that's okay. Yeah, and the only other thing I regret is the weight, which just, I woke up one day and it was there.
You're not
And
alone.
and that didn't start until I started hormones. So yeah. Anyway.
Do we want to go back to online questions? Were there still some?
Yes, we have 2 more, and Janet, you've been waiting a long time.
Thanks. So I have a really good friend for the last 30 years or so, whose son who has been one of the most difficult kids ever, after a couple of suicide attempts at a young age, declared himself to be trans, and she has absolutely refused to accept it. She works with militant groups advocating for laws that would ban any kind of medical or even psychological affirmative care for anybody under 25. And I have a really hard time talking to her because I don't, this church is my community, and I know what is real. And so we were texting, and I was writing really carefully, and I used they, referring to her daughter, and she just scorched me like you wouldn't believe. Like, don't you have any respect for me? I mean, it's really terrible, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk to her about it, and it doesn't feel very authentic not to mention it, because it's what she deals with it's what she's given her life to. And I would love some advice.
That's really, really unfortunate. I had
It's
a
so sad.
situation like, anybody who doesn't know what I do, I'm a funeral director. And I had a situation like that where we had a transgender woman pass away, and her family were completely against her transition, refused to use female pronouns when we were meeting. And I insisted on using them all the way through. And eventually I said, I respect you. I do respect you. And I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, and I want to do the very best I can for your family. But I also respect the person who's passed away. And her respect was to be referred to in female pronouns. And that's what I'm going to do. And I don't know the answer, Janet, because that's very, very unfortunate. Yeah, I don't know. Anybody got any bright ideas? It's really tough.
It's really tough. I guess I would share one thing that happened to me. I mean, I'm sad to hear that, Janet, but I know the way our country is right now. There's just a lot of, fear mongering. I had the experience. I know Derek and Craig were there. There was one of the anti-trans, anti-story time protests that happened at the Redwood City Public Library. And I know Craig and Derek were there, and I was. And I made this decision to go talk to some of the protesters. And I know a lot of people were like, don't do that, which was actually good advice, but I felt like, I just am feeling like I want to put a face to it. I want to say, I'm a mom, like you, and, this, to put a face to it. And I came out of it really mixed. I was like upset for like a week or two after. It was a very rattling experience. They're very sure of themselves. They've got all this, misinformation, and it's it's very scary. I still feel like having just put it out, to the extent that I have the emotional strength to do so, to put it out there like, actually, it's not so scary. Actually, it's a thing. Actually, gender is complicated, whatever it is, to just try to normalize it, I think is helpful the more that more of us do that.
Yeah, I have a friend I went to high school and college with, and I talked to him during the pandemic over Zoom, and I told him about Ava's transition and so forth. He said, "Oh, actually, I have a child who's doing the same thing." And the problem is, he said that some of his children were not accepting of it. So he's got several children, and some of the older children were not at all accepting. And then I tried to reach out to him again recently. I haven't been able to get a hold of him. I suspect that maybe he's just uncomfortable because we have been supportive of Ava's transition, and we're all able to be kind of on the same side. And then he's got this interfamily conflict, and he's probably struggling with that. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think that kind of struggle is real and hard to deal with.
Yeah, people are so strange.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially as a parent, Janet, to your friend, like for that mother, you know, like that their child is still their child, like whatever happens. And really all it's risk is losing your relationship with your child. You're not going to stop whatever they're going to be, who they're going to be, but it sounds like you're at great risk of losing, you know, possibly forever your relationship with your child. So hopefully your friend comes around.
I mean, you bring your child up presumably to, you know, be a good person and do good things in the world and make informed decisions and have the strength to stand on their own 2 feet. And, you know, then why hold it against them when they actually don't go and make those decisions?
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard for me to see that. But then I'm not a parent, so, you know, I know it's different for people. So.
Oh, hold on. And I think there's another one online, right?
Yes, Vida. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Just wanted to throw in my voice of support and thank you for sharing. My daughter also came out very similar time frame, 2020. Much later in life, though, around 40 years, and I think it's this whole social divide that made it so hard for her to do this. And her father has not accepted this, and there's a big rift there. So, I mean, we just have to, the world is what it is now, unfortunately. But that's all, just throwing in my support and thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it is a risk, surely, right? Ever having a child, it's a risk. You know, you don't know what you're going to get. It's talking to you, Andrew Chislett. If you missed his announcement today, his wife's pregnant, expecting their first baby. But it is, you know, it is a gamble. I mean, you know, like I said, you get this little soul and you bring it up as best you can, and then if they decide they have to cut ties with you, that's what they have to do for their own safety and their own sanity, you know. So.
Well, I think Vida, was there a question from Vida on the Zoom?
Yes, thank you. I don't know whether this is a question, but just to say, my first experience was about 30 years ago when one of my colleagues in the biology department, with whom I was quite close because we're both invertebrate zoologists. By the way, you don't have to be crazy to be an invertebrate zoologist, but it helped. Anyhow, and we used to have coffee sometimes together. And I noticed that he seemed to be losing weight, and I was concerned about that. Just the opposite, Elliot, of your concerns. And so he said, you know, can we go to coffee? And yeah, we did. He says, I have something to share with you. And he shared with me that he'd been diagnosed with gender dysphoria and that he was starting to take hormone treatments, and that's why his body was changing. I was so relieved. I didn't know really what gender dysphoria meant, but he did not have a fatal cancer. That was my reaction. And he did have his psychologist come and talk to the whole biology department to discuss this issue, and also to talk about some of the medical and physical changes that our colleague was going to go through. And then he became a visiting professor at Moss Landing for 1 year. And, you know, at Moss Landing, everybody wears a t-shirt and jeans. Nobody kind of knows what gender is going along. And that was when he became Shannon. But his mother, by the way, had apparently known that feminine side. And when the father, who was in the army, was away, his mother would sometimes dress him as a girl and allow him to be a girl. And he actually, in his teen years, was a girl for about 3 years. So it was a very interesting situation. But it's helped the biology department to, get the scientific facts about this. And incidentally, Shannon is very successful, married, has a happy life now. But he had been married before. I keep saying he for the past. Had been married before and had a son. And then the son, at the age of about 30, decided he was also transgender, and he is now Tara. So it's been a very interesting relationship, and I know several other transgender people. So I'm just expressing, I'm wondering, one of the things I noticed was the qualities that I had admired before in Bill were still there in Shannon. The same personality that I was fond of was there. And I think that was a very helpful thing. And the biology department, except for one person, accepted the change. So just wanted to share that little story, and I'll shut up now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Were there any more questions online, or is that the last one? Okay. Any other questions
Can I
here?
make a
Comments?
comment?
Oh,
Yeah, I just want to make a comment to add to Vita, because I think if you are a biologist, you will know that in both plant and animal areas, there's a wide spectrum of different ways that animals and plants express any kind of gender. So I think maybe as a scientist, you're more open-minded to what happens with humans as well.
okay. Oh, Andy has a question. Hang on.
I just wanted to say regarding Elliot, and I've known you pretty much since I started at this church 12 years ago, and you started pretty soon, and that it's been an honor and a privilege, and I can speak sure for the choir as well, to see your journey and to go on that with you, and to see you happy and
Most of the
successful
time.
now. And yeah, I agree with David that you still have a fabulous voice, and everyone just loves you here. And Elliot gave a fabulous recital in San Francisco. It was very fabulous. It was. So thank you, Elliot.
Thank you.
For questions, would you like to make any kind of closing comments or any other thoughts?
I guess if I was going to do a closing comment, there's a poem. This group likes poetry, so I might just share a poem. It's by Julia Serrano, who she's an author. She actually coined the term. We haven't talked about cisgender. Does everybody know what cisgender means? You're the gender you identify with at birth. Anyway, Julia Serrano is a cool author, and so she wrote this. Quote. When I look at transgender women, I see both an endless strength and inconsolable sadness. I see someone who has overcome humiliation and abuses that would flatten the average person. I see a woman who has been made to feel shame for her desires and yet had the courage to pursue them anyway. I see a woman who was forced against her will into boyhood, who held on to a dream that everybody in her life tried to beat out of her. I see a wisdom that comes from having to fight for your right just to be recognized as female, from unabashedly asserting your right to be feminine in an inhospitable world. So that's dedicated to Ava.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us and being with us. We'll see you next Sunday for worship, which is Palm Sunday. Do not forget to bring your palm or palm adjacent leafy thing so we can join on the screen and wave our leaves in the air. So good to be with you all.